Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest this day. It's Humphrey Ker. Hello, Humphrey.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Humphrey, you are the executive director of AFC Wrexham or Wrexham AFC? Wrexham AFC. And people will have seen you upon the screens in their homes.
Yes.
In the Welcome to Wrexham documentary series.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
We're also joined by JJ and Seb. Hi, guys.
Hello.
That was a very damp introduction for the two of you.
I mean, it just,
more build, you want more?
I felt like that was a bit. Well, no, but I want to be.
I want the main guests to know how important they are.
But I still
I
want to
immediately
feel
very important.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
That's good. We'll chip it down over the course of the next bit of time. Can you tell me first, please, how you became involved in this thing and what happened?
Yes. So at the start of the coronavirus lockdown fest that we had from March 2020 onwards in the US and the UK and around the world, I was working as a writer on the Apple TV critically ignored sitcom Mythic Quest,
Which is very good, by the way.
It is. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We got dominated by Ted Lasso on that platform, but it's a bit of a hidden gem, I think. And I was working for Rob McElhenney as one of his writers, and I would quite often in that room sit and watch football. And I was there from, I think, early 2019 through to, I was still doing it during lockdown on season 3 earlier on in this year, and I would watch Liverpool games in that room because quite often we would be there. Our lunch break is at 12. That's 8 p.m. UK time, so you'd be getting Champions League games. And I and one other member of staff were both big into Liverpool, and so we would quite often.
Would you get a 2-hour lunch break to watch the whole game?
No, we'd watch as much as we could basically. So we would usually get the first. We'd have an hour, so we get the first half and half time. And particularly, we were watching it a lot during Liverpool's run to the Madrid final in 2019. We watched the Barcelona home leg in there and lost our minds. And Rob was always lightly intrigued. He's a big sports fan, but very American about it. And it's boring. They just pass sideways. Nothing ever happens. They flop all the time, which, by the way, happens all the time in basketball. But for some reason, they're fixated on it happening in football.
Like flopping.
Diving, right? They call it flopping. But yes, basketball it's rife there, but that's fine. But when we do it in football, it's unacceptable. Anyway, that's by the by. And when we went into lockdown, we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks. That was what we were talking. The LA kind of county health board was like, it's 2 weeks, then everyone go back to work. So we were all treating it that first 2 weeks like, this is great. We've got 2 weeks paid holiday. Just got to stay at home. So we were all exchanging recommendations. You should watch this. You should listen to this. You should play this game. The show is based in a video game studio. So there was quite a lot of exchange of that. And I told Rob, look, you keep making fun of me for why I love football, and you don't understand the context, the like cultural DNA context of football for us. You should watch this thing Sunderland Till I Die. That will give you as good a primer in like what these teams mean to their communities and how it's very different to what being a Raiders fan is in the US. And the Raiders, currently the Las Vegas Raiders, they were the Oakland Raiders, they were the LA Raiders before that. They move around.
Sure.
Their fans sort of stay with them, but then sometimes just like, well, they're not in this town anymore, so I support this team.
Yeah.
They don't have that same like you get bitten by the bug and then it's sort of dreadful for the rest of your life thing that we do. And watching Sunderland Till I Die was kind of a perfect primer. And he texted me and was like, oh yeah, watch the first episode. It's kind of all right, but Caitlin wasn't that into it, his wife, and like, we're going to try something else. I was like, okay, I tried. And then he texted me 2 days later and said, oh, Caitlin's gone out of town. She'd gone up to check on her folks during this whole weird time. And I sat down, I watched both series in one sitting. He's like, I started on episode 2, couldn't stop. I just watched the whole lot all the way through. I cried, I laughed, I like jumped out of my seat, I did everything, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, great, you get it. It's job done. Anyway, that's enough of that. But then he was like, we should do this. We should buy a football team. And I was like, ha, 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 ha. That sounds great. You don't pay me enough, all the usual sort of good stuff. And he was like, no, seriously, like, how much would it cost to buy a football team? I was like, well, I don't know. Like, if you want to buy Chelsea, it's $1.5 billion, which I'm pretty confident you don't have. But if you go down, as you go further down the pyramid, and the great thing about Sunderland Till I Die is that he'd seen promotion and relegation. Yeah. That was the thing he was fascinated by, because 95% of Americans have no concept of that, which is not a a slight on them. It just doesn't exist in their sport. There's a big thing over there of tanking your season. If you're get halfway through the season, you're like, I guess we're not going to win. You intentionally lose because it gives you an advantage further down the line.
Yeah.
And the fact that you could be in a relegation battle and it would mean that every game mattered for all 38 games of a season or 46 in the National League or whatever it may be. He was just fascinated. So he said, we should buy a team. I was like, okay, great. I continued to think this was a lockdown like conversation that was just two friends sort of jabbering about something they weren't really going to do. But I was like, I've got nothing else to do. So I went on Wikipedia and Football Manager, literally, and was like, oh, okay, these Football Manager, as we know, is an incredible database of information that's actually quite hard to find elsewhere. And I picked out 8 to 10 clubs in the National League North and South, and League Two.
Have you ever said what the other clubs were?
Yeah, I think I've named some of them. So Hartlepool was one we looked at vaguely. Macclesfield was talked about. There were a couple that were talked about, that were in trouble. We were like, we knew from the jump we wanted to find somewhere that sort of needed a helping hand or felt like it deserved a kind of a stroke of luck.
Yeah.
So some of the ones that I looked at initially were sort of, we struck off quite quickly because they were in the outskirts of London or Manchester or somewhere where you felt like, well, there's plenty of opportunity here already, in a way.
Smaller fish in a big pond, a bit.
Smaller fish in a big pond. I mean, Wrexham very quickly became top dog through a variety of factors, but the two biggest were the fans, which sounds like a very pat answer, but it's true, because with the season before we became involved or started the process with a COVID shortened season 1920, they were averaging 4,500 a week at the racecourse when they were 19th in the National League.
Yeah,
it's an unbelievable number of people, and it told you this was the definition of a kind of sleeping giant, a fallen great of the game. The highest place they'd ever got to was then Division 2 in 1979-80. I think they were promoted 78. It might be 78, 79. Someone will correct me.
Those are the kind of details you have to get right now as the executive director of Wrexham.
Yes, but yes, in the late 70s, let's put it that way, they got to Division 2, but it was one season stay there. But they had been getting crowds of 35,000 back in those days. It was it was this great entity that had fallen from heights. They had great adventures in Europe. They'd beaten Porto in Europe. They'd done all sorts of exciting things via the Welsh Cup. That's how they would get in the Cup Winners' Cup. But now they had fallen on hard times. That was part one. Part two was of where they scored really highly on this kind of matrix was the geography. You've got the whole of North Wales that comes through us to go to Liverpool and Manchester to watch Premier League games.
Well, I was going to say, actually, sorry to interrupt you, but I went to secondary school in Colwyn Bay in North Wales, and I knew one person who was a Wrexham fan then, and I wonder, do you know, has that changed in the last year?
It's changed enormously, and my metric for measuring that is that so many folk there tell me when I bump into them in the club car park or whatever it may be, that they're taking their kids to to play junior football now, and 2-3 years ago it was all Manchester City and Liverpool tops. It was all Salah shirts, De Bruyne shirts, and now they are all in Wrexham shirts, and I think that is a sign that people just wanted. They did an unbelievable job, the fans, of keeping the club alive. They rescued it from unscrupulous former owners, and they supported it as best they could. But the club was on a slow decline, and it was on its way down. We had this huge, wonderful, characterful old stadium, but there's a massive money pit. It's a money pit for us, but we're fortunate we've got enough money that we can afford to patch the roof and fix the pipes and do all of this, that, and the other. But it's an old stadium, and that was creating a slow but steady decline in enthusiasm, and smaller crowds coming each year, smaller budget each year. The team was performing less well each year, and I think when we took over and we started to look at the books, I think if we hadn't come in, I think relegation was on the cards, and I think possibly a winding up of the club or having to sell the stadium and kind of redo a Phoenix Football Club situation. So. That all those things were big factors that when we were looking for different teams, like that's why Wrexham.
Was it being based in Wales maybe a cynical look at it, but to do with the branding, how it's easier to brand if you can attach it to that whole country almost?
I did remember saying to Rob, because it was just Rob and I initially, and then Ryan, Rob kind of went to Ryan to ask if he wanted to sponsor the team, and he was like, "Oh, I want to do the whole thing." So I remember saying to Rob initially, like, "Well, this effectively every game is a derby. Like every game that we play has got an edge to it because our fans just legitimately have beef with every team we play. Some more than others, some like historical beefs, and they travel. I think our fans, 99% of our fans travel incredibly well. They're very welcome everywhere they go. We've had trouble with elements. There's a lot of clubs that are finding post-pandemic. There's been a kind of uptick in crowd problems, especially further down the leagues. But yeah, our fans travel great. They travel in great numbers. They are vocal. They're positive. They have a lot of fun everywhere they go. But they travel very much with like, we're Welsh and we're coming here to remind you of that, which is a great thing.
Let me ask you a question about you, because I think when I watched through the documentary, for which you were a sort of consultant, right?
Yeah, so I don't actually. I have no. Well, this is my line, but it's true. I have very little say in what goes into the documentary, as evidenced by episode, I think 13, where they show part of me auditioning unsuccessfly for a Star Wars TV show.
It's one of the best bits.
It's mortifying, and I hate it. Luckily, there was more. Here's the degree of my effect.
Is that the bit where you got worried about how fat you looked on camera?
Yes.
You kept doing it again because...
Yes. Yeah. There's nothing... I couldn't do anything about it. I was like, I hope they want a fat alien. But turns out they did not.
You don't get many fat aliens, do you?
No, but on the audition, on the breakdown, it was like, must be over 6'5". So it's like, it's got to be an alien, right? So I tried to be alien-y in my audition. And then when I watched it, I think Rupert Friend played the part that I was up for. And I was like, well, they just probably offered it to him anyway. I never was going to get this in the first place. But also he was not particularly alien-y. He was just grey. He was a person who was grey. Yeah.
He's not the executive director of Wrexham.
But he's not the executive director of Wrexham.
And
so
let's be honest, which is the better role? Which brings me to ask you, I think when people like or love football, when they're younger, they imagine being a football player. And then as they get older, they imagine maybe being a football coach. And then as they become wiser and realise their own limitations, the only thing left is like, maybe I could run a football club. You're sort of living out a dream. As someone who, I hope you won't mind me saying, didn't have any experience running a football club before you arrived.
No.
Is it weird? What's it like? Does it feel like...
I think one of the key things is, and I've said this a few times, I don't really run the football club. Much of my role is liaising between the owners and the people who do run the club on a day-to-day basis. So there are instances where, decisions come to me to make, and I will make those decisions, and they get implemented or whatever it may be. But they tend to be very specific ones, and they're usually couched in kind of, ultimately, it has to be someone at my level. It has to be a board level person to make this decision. So I sit on the board with Rob and Ryan, and I, one of the main things that I do and can do is I can commit the club legally to things. So when we are, whether it's signing sponsorship deals or whether we are signing players or whatever it may be, I can commit the club to doing things. So yes, I have no experience. It has been a very steep learning curve. I mean, my job has been, I've been a comedy writer and an actor for since I left university, and that has a very specific set of skills, not many of which are applicable in football or the running of a football club.
Some.
But I mean, a lot of it is just, I have loved football my whole life. I think I have an understanding of what is important to fans and what they want and what they care about. And my job is to kind of, as much as possible, and it doesn't require a great deal of steering for me, but steer Rob and Ryan in the directions that I think will be popular. There are things that they want to do sometimes. I'm like, just culturally over here, I don't know that would go down so well. And there are other things where I'm like, and by the way, there've been a couple of those where I've been like, I'm not sure. And then they've been like, no, we want to do it. And then people love it. So I'm like, what do I know? I'm an idiot.
Was there a point when you were sketching out the concept for Rob, was there a point for you where you suddenly thought, I mean, because it sounds like you had an amazing job at the time, was there a point which you thought, oh God, I want this, I'm a football fan, this would be so cool, even without a kind of a designated role? You wanted it to happen?
Well, yes, just to be part of it. I mean, the thing that I think I'm absolutely sure all three of you will get what I'm meaning here. Like the moment when I was like, I think there's going to be an opportunity here for me to enter a football stadium wearing a club badge, and for it to be a real thing, and for it to be like I am part of this, and not just because I bought a replica shirt from the club shop. I am a Liverpool fan by night now, As you can hear from my thick Bootle accent, I'm nowhere near Liverpool. I've got nothing to do with it.
And how tired you are, staying up all night supporting Liverpool.
Yes, that's a long shift.
I was the definition of a full kit. Like I always had all the gear, no idea. I loved it. Every Christmas, all I wanted was Liverpool stuff, But I've been to Anfield too many times to count, and I love it. And I've always felt very welcome there. I've always felt part of it. But always with this slight air of like, I'm not really, no one's going to miss me if I'm not here. And I'm not really, I haven't done anything to forward the cause.
You're not vital to the operation.
I'm not, no one, yes, they don't, when Mohamed Salah scores, he doesn't pick me out of the crowd and thump his chest and I give him a thumbs up.
You don't know that because you don't know who he's pointing at.
That's true. I mean, I'm always like trying to position myself like, am I in the angle of his point? But
I wonder if he's watched the Welcome to Wrexham. I bet loads of footballers have watched it.
I mean, that is too exciting to even contemplate.
It's fun, isn't it?
I mean, the thing I'm most excited about, well, I'll tell you two things. One thing that's really weird is, and this is something that I've found talking to a lot of people inside football, you never lose your love for that other club, but your focus, so much of my energy is going into Wrexham now that now I find myself in situations where I literally be like, oh, Liverpool are playing, aren't they? They're like on right now. I wonder what the score is, which I never could have conceived of 2 years ago. It was such a my week was so geared around like, okay, all right, just got to get through these next 2 days and then there's the Champions League game or whatever.
And do Wrexham defeats now affect you in the same way that Liverpool ones
so
do?
much worse than it was then. Because I was always quite good. I love football. I was quite good at getting the high and avoiding the low about football. I was always quite sort of good at going, oh yes, this was great, but like, oh well, what are you going to do? We lost. That sucks. So I get over it quite quickly. Wrexham is a whole different thing because it's so. It really. I have another job. I'm acting on a TV show in the States right now. I'm on hiatus for the next 2 weeks, which is why I'm here, but I'm going back until January. But whilst I am there, I mean, I am just all the time, I'm on my phone checking like my emails and doing this, that, and the other, and just trying to keep abreast of things, waiting for, every Friday night, our head of our medical staff sends an email with like what the current state of all the players are, like what their medical situation is. And I'm like, it's kind of Kev's emails coming in.
That's a milestone in the week for you.
Yeah, because it's, it's that thing of, you have players that are injured and you're like, God, I can't wait until they get back. And you truly have that thing where, get an email that's like, oh, someone's progressing faster than we thought, so we think we're going to have them back 2 games earlier. And then other things like there's been a setback with this guy, and it just means so much more to me than reading on Twitter a thing in Liverpool Echo being like, oh, we're hearing that Fabinho's hamstring's still tight.
It sounds like Football Manager when you start getting emails.
I was also going to say, like, listening to you talk about it, there's the documentary is brilliant, by the way.
Yes, we all love
I think
it.
like we were saying before we started recording, I think like for the three of us here, we got through the first couple of episodes where it feels much more like a normal sports documentary, but then it turns into something which like you can see has been written by people who understand structure. And there's a moment in it towards the end when Wrexham are in the FA Trophy semi-final. Yes. Ryan Reynolds has gone to the game, and the episode is quite funny because Rob McElhenney is at home, is upset to have been left behind. It's all done very well. But the thing I think, amongst other things that sets it apart from other sports documentaries of the kind, is that I've never seen somebody catch the bug before. And in that moment, you see Ryan Reynolds, he appears to be enjoying it beforehand. He's up for, there's no suggestion that it's a cynical thing on his behalf, but it's not until that moment where you literally watch him on camera click. And it's like, it's actually moving to see it. I don't know.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. And that was an amazing thing to be aware of. I wasn't there for that game. I was back in the States, so I was following from home. And Sean Harvey, who's the strategic advisor to the board, who is our man on the ground, who is kind of been so central to everything we've done, he was there, and he and I, there's a group thread with all of us on it, with Rob and Ryan and Sean and I on, that we talk business and updates and all sorts of things,
memes,
and then he and I have like separate, lots of loads of hilarious memes. And then we have Sean and I have a separate thing because we're just talking so much more, and we don't want to clog that up. And he sent me a message in this separate one being like, Ryan's crying in the corner at full time. And I was like, what? And he's like, I don't know what's happened, but he's got it. He got it, and he got it bad. Yeah. And it's true, because I think up until that point, he'd been into the whole thing and he'd seen the excitement of the whole thing, but his interest, and I will say Rob has gone through a similar transformation, albeit his was earlier and a bit faster. They saw the whole thing initially as a giant philanthropic engine.
Yeah.
That's what they were excited about. Was one of the reasons we picked Wrexham. It was a town, it's like many in the UK, that's been sort of left behind a little bit over the last 20 years. They've had a big coal industry, big steel industry, big brewing. It all went away, and there was just a sense of like, this is a place that could just use a stroke of luck. It could use something good happening. So Ryan's interest to start off with was like, well, what if we build up this football club thing? That'll be good for the town, and then we can do other things to like do good things for this town. And then over the course of the season, he came to the Maidenhead game, he came to Torquay, and both of those were pretty disappointing results. And he was like, "This is great. It's cool. It's fun. It's like I like this a lot." But that game with a 91st minute, winner effectively, followed by a 94th minute sort of certaintier.
Yes.
Assurer. He just lost it, and you see they've got the footage. There's fan footage of him standing in the thing with him, like with his hands on his head. He just couldn't believe it because it was a great goal, and it was against our big rivals in the league at that time, Stockport, who are traditionally a rival of Wrexham's anyway, but who we were kind of trying to track down in the league. And that game, that was the point where we started to believe, we might just pip them to the post in the league. Spoiler alert, didn't go that way, but it was like that. I remember at home, that moment when I heard the goal go in I was listening to it on our like club commentary, and like losing my mind, and then getting this message from Sean being like Ryan is sobbing, and then you see on the documentary him going around like just embracing players and staff, and like it just was a whole. That was the moment, and from that moment on, there was a marked change in how he kind of approached the whole thing. He had always been interested and abreast of everything, but he was a lot more like just proactive and wanted to know about all the details and so much more. He'd always been very that way on, okay, we're doing this community scheme, we're setting this thing up, we're doing X, Y, and Z. But he suddenly started to be very like, what are we going to do about Maidenhead's approach to their wing-back system on Saturday? I'd be like, I don't know.
The emotional investment solidifies, right?
It just became, and I'm so pleased because that's the thing that happened to me when the first time I went to a professional football match and was like, whoa, this is incredible.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
That's literally the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's lovely to see that on camera.
Were there moments for you which were quite intimidating? There's a scene quite early on where you meet the players for the first time.
And I love that bit.
For me too, because it's like you don't...
Can we say when Humphrey leaves the room, the door closes slowly and there's a little giggle, little titter from the room?
Certainly is, yeah.
Because you sound like me, and you're out of your element, and you're in a situation which presumably comes with, in the beginning, plenty of cynicism.
Yeah.
Was that kind of, for you, was that quite tricky?
It was. I mean, it was and it wasn't. I mean, I think the fact that I was just so excited, as I say, and again, I think talking to the right sort of three people about it, because I know that all of you, I think, would feel very similar. You're like, well, this is an opportunity I never dreamt I would get. I never even thought. You described that kind of the course you go through. And I had the same thing. I was like, I would like to score a winner for England in the World Cup final, and I would like to do. I'm sure JJ has very similar.
I would like to score the winner against England.
Yeah, ideally it would be England. Yes, yeah. Just Ryan Christie just dropping one on your head at the back post. Anyone, truly anyone. But yes, I did go through that process, and at a certain point was like, of course you're never going to work in football. You've got no appropriate skills. I could never, at a certain point in life, I feel like you get locked into I got locked into, I'm going to work in entertainment in some way, shape or form. I've not got the skills for
What a
else.
drag.
What a drag. No, I mean, I'm very fortunate because it's particularly in the last 2 years, I've got to work 2 of my 3 dream jobs. I work as an actor on a TV show. I'm the executive director of a football club. I will never be a fighter pilot, which is the other one that I wanted to be when I was little, but I was never that little, and I knew pretty early on that I was too tall to be. Yes.
Sure.
Oh, well, not that. I just literally wouldn't fit in the cockpit of a fighter plane.
Sure, right.
I remember going to the Royal Tournament when I was a kid, and they had a Spitfire there, and they put me into it, and I was probably 12, and they were like, no,
unless
mate.
you stop growing now.
Yeah, they were like, already you're too tall.
What's the Royal Tournament? Is that a big playing show?
It was a big thing they used to do at Earl's Court every year. That was like a sort of a bit like the Edinburgh tattoo. It was like a tattoo thing.
Right.
It was great fun.
The fire carriage gun.
I've been to it
like
once.
And they assemble.
I went to it once with my mum and dad. Yeah, all I remember is horses.
Yeah, lots of horses. They would do this thing called the gun race, where they would like carry. There was a Navy thing where they like take apart like a gun, a big cannon, and like carry it from one side of the thing to the other.
Reassemble it and shoot it. And then if you shot it first, you won. And it was
like a weird military circus almost.
That's a very good description of it. And and it was also like heavily designed to like try and get 12-year-old boys to be like, I want to be in the army. So when they grew up, they joined the army, and it worked on me great.
Sure.
Until I discovered I couldn't fit in an airplane.
You were too large.
Yeah. They were like, no. And I also read Roald Dahl's autobiography, Going Solo, which talks about him flying Hurricanes in Malta during World War II, where he was 6'3" and he couldn't turn as hard as anybody else because it would bang his knees. And I was like, you'll die. How did you not die? Anyway, by the by. So you have all these wonderful opportunities. So although I knew going into it that I would be quite, it was a deep breath. I mean, I remember they have that thing of me like riding up on my bicycle, and I would bike into the stadium every day because I was staying about 2 miles away from the stadium, and I was like, this would be good for me. But every time I was going in, I was a little bit like, okay, let's see what today brings. And actually, everyone was incredibly welcoming. Yeah. I think, I don't blame the players at all for being this is very weird, or Dean for being this is very weird, because it was weird.
It was funny.
It was. Of course, it's like this big. Who is this big Wally? And I, in my wisdom, was like, I shouldn't really be here.
Well,
like, trying to be self-deprecating.
You're self-effacing, and you're kind of charming in a sort of whoopsie daisy kind of way.
But what I should really have done is try to. Thank you. I'll take it.
No, that's a compliment.
I am
Hugh Grant in Notting Hill.
You'd be coming in your fighter pilot uniform.
Yes, what I should have done is I should have played a part. I should have sort of kicked the door in and be like, what's up, everybody?
I was going to say, is it not quite performative? Because it's like a performance, right? You know it's going to be nervous talking in front of these boys. It's like
I feel like that in front of them.
Well, but I think I described it, and it was they used my description of it in the documentary, which was it really was like being back at school, and suddenly you were with like all the cool kids from like the first 11, the top football boys. And I was the guy that was spending a lot of time pretending to be a dinosaur. And I suddenly had to be like, I'm in charge. You're going to listen to me.
I felt that very
keenly.
Sounds very familiar.
I really did. No, sure.
Because even though, in your position within the club, theoretically, if we're talking hierarchically, you have a very senior position. You're alongside the owners. But you walk into that room with all the football players.
Yes.
And you presumably feel like a little boy.
Totally. And if I approach my role in a different way, I could be very didactic. I mean, I have the authority theoretically to do all sorts of things.
What kind of thing?
Let's see this season's team. If any of you are listening, just behave. No, but very early on I established both with Dean and that set of players, and then when Phil came in, everybody else, I said, look, I'm not going to tell you ever how to do your jobs. I don't know how to do your jobs. I have theories and opinions, but they're no better than anyone else's. You see time and again when people come in and take over football clubs, they're like, listen, I'm very good at business. I did this and I made a load of money, and as a result I know everything about how you do everything, and you get disastrous results. That happens quite often, and one of the things that I think Rob and Ryan have been very sensible about, and that I will say I'm going to pat myself on the back about, is that we've always gone, we don't know how to do this. All we'll do is try and give you guys the tools to do the things that you need. So if you need something, come to us, and then tell me, and then I'll tell them, and I'll try and explain to them why you want this thing, and what the benefit of it is. And by the way, in the main, they're just like, well, if Phil's asked for it, then just give it to him. Like if they want this or they want that. I mean, the only place that gets a certain point is we set a budget, and you get towards the end of a transfer window, and it's like, if we could just get this guy, then we'll do X and Y, and then you have to have that debate. But we've backed them very, very fully, and we're reaping the benefits now because we're currently second in the National League by 1 point, and we're flying, scored an insane amount of goals.
The owners credit you for that. That's what they say in the documentary. I mean, one of the things they say towards the end is that whilst you arrived not knowing much about what you were going to do, they now say that you could be like a top football executive, or that, like, they talk about your
I think they're trying to offload me to another team as quickly as possible. I'm desperately hoping, like, Blackburn Rovers, do you want him? He's great.
When this began, did you think that your role in it might be a kind of, the middleman between, the beginning and the end? Did you think that you would be there forever, or are you thinking now that you will have a role as long as they do?
I'm hoping so. I mean, the only doubt. my wife and my family all live in Los Angeles, and I spend about half the year here, and she can come sporadically, but she's much more successful than I am in her field, which she's also a TV writer, but like a way better one than me. And so, we've always said between her and I, and she works with Rob as well, so that everyone, it's all a kind of big family thing, that at some stage, we know we need to keep an eye on that, because it's a challenge. It's a lot of traveling. I spend a lot of time on my own in my little flat in Wrexham, and that is, it's not necessarily something that is going to go forever. I mean, I think in terms of my transformation, they are being very generous in terms of me being a top football executive. That's not true. What I am is I'm very passionate, and I love the club, and I love the players, and I love the fans, and I have a very good relationship with the fans, because I think in talking to me, they realize that I love it. And I get one of the things that is such a blessing about this. I would have loved to work for a football team, irrespective of what the football team was or who the owners were. But working for two people, and this is real saccharine, you can edit this out if people are being sick in their cars, this. They're two people who are good people. They want the best for the team in the town, which comes through in the documentary, which is produced by a production company they picked or whatever. Yeah. But it makes it a lot easier when we're not here to make a load of money, and we're not here to kind of talking to Sean, who's worked for lots of people over the years, he loves working for Wrexham, because for a long time he worked for various people who were like, I mean, I know I said I was going to put 10 million into the transfer budget this winter, but I'm not doing that. And actually, I'd love you to get 2 million out of the club by Christmas, please. Mm-hmm. And he, as executive or chief executive or whatever role he had at various different places, had to be like, all right, it's part of my job is to go out and sell that to the fans, as like not being the end of the world. And for us, it's just a pleasure. So for me, I think my what I have brought to the team is just I'm really enjoying myself, and I'm positive, and I've got the nice thing that I'm so far the fans have allowed me to sporadically scold them when they get too upset about things I don't think they should be too upset about, and I can say with truth, like, I'm a fan. I'm basically have the same views as you guys do. Yeah. But all I'll say is, like, transfer window's not closed yet. We're working on target. So, last January we had a thing where we knew going into the January transfer window what we needed to get kind of a more complete team. Yeah. And you see that in documentary, particularly it's Ollie Palmer, basically like we need a big, strong, mobile centre forward who can hold the ball up and bring Paul into play.
And you were injured.
And I was I was like, Phil, just give me a go. And he was like, absolutely not. Can you touch your toes? It's like, no. It's like, okay, you're out. You're cut. Yeah.
Is that really? Oh man, I would never get anywhere near.
You've got to be able to touch your toes.
I haven't touched my feet for years.
Well, yeah. I'm recently finding it hard to see them when I stand up straight, which is also a bad sign. Yes, no. I mean, we knew who we wanted, and it took us the whole of the transfer window, because Wimbledon didn't want to sell him. He didn't really want to come initially because he's from Wimbledon. He was like, "It's all going well for me. I don't know. I'm not sure." And so we had to go through the motions. But when you're a fan, you don't hear you don't know what's going on. You don't understand the ins and outs of it. You don't have all these things, and so you are understandably, because you want the best for the team, you start to panic. Like, what's going on? What's happening? Yeah. So I think one of the things that has grown up that's nice is that, like, I think people know that we're in some ways a lot more blunt than many football organisations. Like I write a column on the website, and I tweet, and I'll just be like, it's fine, chill out, and people are like, oh, okay, I guess it's all right. And then fortunately that works, provided we end up signing Ollie before the end of the window, which at times was looking a bit hairy, and we were like, we've got to look at other strikers, but people have put a lot of trust in us, which is great, and we've, I think thus far done a pretty good job of repaying that trust. Yeah. We tend to do what we say we're going to do. We've invested a lot in the stadium. We've invested a lot in the squad. We've tried to, there are restrictions of things that we can do because of how old the stadium is, and how we're getting 10,000 people a week now. Our food and beverage offering is bad because we've got 2 tiny concrete kiosks that are used to serving 4,000 people. Yeah. So we're always like, I'm sorry, people are kind of, well, I can't get a sausage roll. It's like, well, yeah, we've run out of them, and the cooker doesn't work, and
there's not
all these sorts of things. So yeah, it's because we're also getting a lot of people back in who have been going to Premier League stadiums for the last 10 years, and so we're used to amazing. Like, they've got nachos at Burnley. Where are your nachos?
Yeah. I prefer it without the nachos. It's better when it's just a pie or something.
But I will say to people, to be fair, Wrexham fans would be like, well, I'd take a pie if you had a pie, but we can't. We run out of pies too quickly. We're running out of pies, running out of beer on match days regularly, and people are like, boo.
Can I ask then, do you ever get frustrated? Because I remember speaking to Steve Morrison, ex-footballer, he's a coach now, on this podcast, and the one thing that he said that stuck with me for ages was that if his coach has asked him not to press as a forward, but the crowd are shouting, close him down.
Yeah.
You either do it and the coach is unhappy with you, or you don't do it and the crowd think you're doing something wrong. In your position, presumably it does happen that fans don't like what you're doing.
Oh, definitely. And this is not to paint a picture that like we've got absolutely everything right and they're happy about everything. You know, we've had to do things like we put ticket prices up, which people were very unhappy about, but we hadn't done that since 2006, and we made it £1 extra a game, which we're like, I don't know how we could do a smaller price increase, but what they will say, which is quite right, is that the knock-on effect to season tickets was some season tickets went up by £100.
Yeah,
and people aren't super duper happy about that. But at the same time, it's sort of what I would say is we have a responsibility to the football club to run it as efficiently and appropriately as we possibly can. So having been fan-owned for a long time, there were lots of things that were great for fans, but bad for the football club.
Yeah.
So we had to take certain steps. Another thing, we had the Centenary Club, which is our sort of our bar in the Yale stand, our older stand, or the Wrexham Lager stand as it is right now. That was traditionally teeming on a match day. It's one of the very few indoor spaces in the stadium, but it had so many people in it that when we got in and we were like, what's the license? How many people are allowed in here? We discovered it was 2 or 3 times over the capacity.
Sure.
And previously, I think the council and local authorities and stuff had kind of looked the other way because they were like, this club it's heartbeat of the community. It's in trouble. Lots of them are fans, so they didn't want to kick up a fuss. But with the increased attention on us, now we're like, we got to play by the rules because we, with that increased attention comes extra attention from people who don't necessarily have the club's best interest in heart. Mm-hmm. So what we ended up doing was saying, okay, if you want to come in here, you can buy a pass to come in the Centenary Club or pay £5 a game to come in. And it really was mostly, people like, you're going to make way less money than you used to. And like, well, it's not actually about that. It's more about we have to be responsible for things that previously maybe people brushed under the carpet or didn't want to address or didn't want to think about.
Is it easier to do that kind of thing because of the fame of Rob and Ryan? Just because like in that situation, like
what do you mean, like do the council listen?
No, I just mean in selling it to fans, because what can Ryan Reynolds materially benefit from Wrexham, because it's so sort of unimaginably successful already, and Rob McElhenney, of course, is really successful in his own right too, and so there's no obvious agenda beyond we're doing the right thing. Does that make it an easier sell?
Yeah. Definitely, I think that people have given us a lot more leeway because of that. Because yes, as you say, and they say this themselves in the documentary, like they can't really. They're not sort of shady foreign businessmen who can disappear back into a sort of rabbit hole if things go wrong. People recognize that if they catastrophically messed up here, it would carry them around. Alex Hamilton was the guy who basically tried to kind of essentially run the club down so he could sell the stadium for a large amount of money, because it's right in the middle of Wrexham, it's prime real estate. It would be a very valuable asset. And so yes, I think we benefited from that for sure, and it has allowed us to say, and I see Wrexham fans talking to each other about this themselves online, when there are those instances of, there are certain elements of the fan base who still understand, and totally fair enough. That's their entitlement, are not into it. They liked the philosophy of a fan-owned club. They like being part of that. They like being part of the process. It was the boundary between club and fans was non-existent at that stage. There wasn't a delineation. The fans were the club was the fans. And now there is a bit. There's a lot of us newcomers that have come in who aren't necessarily from the area, but who are trying to run the football club for the benefit of the fans, but equally they don't have that same access. It used to be that like as soon as we made a bid on a player, every Wrexham fan knew, because it was, the people doing the bidding would literally go down the pub and be like, "Oh, we've tried to sign this guy from Maidenhead." It's exciting, isn't it? And it'd be great fun. And listen, that's one way of doing it.
That is cool.
It's really cool. I understand.
I'd love to meet that guy in the pub. Just yes. I know all the clubs.
Of course, and everyone knew, and there was a lot of gossip. And now, there is a bit more of a barrier, and that does create its own challenges, because people think, people will still go down the pub and tell things, but it's not necessarily what's actually going on. And I see all sorts of wild things. A lot of it is like what we're paying people there's this every now and then, myself and Sean and Fleur Robinson, our CEO, and like various different people will text each other being like, I've just seen we're paying this person £13,000 a week. You know, so every time you find one that trumps the top number, which is currently stands at £13,000 a week, which is a championship / young premiership player. We are not paying anywhere close to that for anyone. You know, we laugh, but it's, you know, time was that people's wages were being discussed in the pub. People were being told X, Y, and Z. And
well, on that specifically for you,
I'm getting paid a lot of money. If that's
you're the one being paid £13,000 a week. But you know, you were a successful and noteworthy person before this, right? And I'm sure that people would recognise you or come up to you or would seek you out. But that kind of recognition is very different from the kind that you would have now, not purely because of the volume, but because now presumably people who recognise you in Wrexham, you have information they want. Like they want to know something that you know, as opposed to just wanting to meet you. How do you feel about your status now in
Wrexham? People have been genuinely so welcoming to me. Like from the moment I kind of got there, even when people, it's interesting. I've not been there very much. In fact, I'm going up tomorrow. It's the first time I've been there since the documentary came out. Right. So I think lots of kind of the hardcore fan base who are obsessed with all things Wrexham know who I am. They have been so friendly, so nice. Every now and then I get stopped in London or actually in Chicago on the way here. I was stopped by two people. They were documentary fans rather than like Wrexham fans per se. But everybody in Wrexham has been so welcoming to us and all the new kind of additions to the family. Which again, I was quite not surprised about, not because of Wrexham, not because of anything, but for me specifically, as we talked about before, me being a public school boy, not being an experienced football person. I think lots of people were initially. I mean, when my involvement was first kind of announced, I would go and sort of snoop around our fan forums and stuff, and would see lots of people being like,
never read the comments.
Sure. I mean, unfortunately, it's like I often describe it as like when a tooth falls out, you can't help sort of sticking your tongue in the hole. Sometimes going and looking at what people sound like. But as I say, people have been 99.99999% of people have been so welcoming and kind and friendly, and I think it's because as I alluded to earlier, they can sense that we are into it. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that is, they can say about me is, I'm not putting up the money, I'm not doing the this, I'm not doing the that. Rob and Ryan quite rightly have sort of achieved a sort of godlike status in Wrexham because they have saved this beloved thing from a pretty dangerous path it was on, which was no one's fault. It was just circumstance had set it on this course that was very difficult to correct without bringing in a lot of outside investment. But what people I think have got from me is that, like, I left work on late on Thursday night in LA, and I went home, went to bed. I got home at about 9 o'clock at night after leaving work. Quickly stuffed some things in a suitcase. Got up at 6:30. Went to the airport. Flew Los Angeles to Chicago to London, London to Newcastle to try and get up there to watch our fourth round FA Cup qualifier. And if you take out the fact that the climate change, and I flew in an airplane, which I probably shouldn't have done, I think people appreciate that we are busting our humps to get to games and get to watch things and do these things. And I was sort of tweeting during the whole thing. One of my flights got delayed and I had to leave my luggage at Heathrow and I had to go and get on a train to get up to Newcastle.
You've come here without a suitcase today.
I've come here without a suitcase.
Because you're a dedicated Wrexham supporter.
I had to buy a jumper off a street vendor to come here. I went to Uniqlo. I got some underpants. The guy had a stall on the street.
But it makes it sound like you were half naked before you got to the street vendor.
No. Actually, I went to the street vendor wearing my very smelly and disgusting clothes that I've been wearing for 2.5 days.
They'll sell you anything if you walk up to them just in your pants.
He was like, please, just put this on and go away.
Just take it.
Do you think that the lovely welcome that you've got and the other guys have had at Wrexham, a lot of that, would that happen without the documentary? Because it kind of goes hand in hand.
I think it would have done because as I say, it was happening long before the documentary came out. I hadn't seen anybody. I haven't seen anyone at the club since the documentary came out. Really, I've spoken to people on the phone and I've been emailing and Zooming and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be interested to see whether my experience changes, whether even more of the fans recognize me, or more fans feel like they, people who maybe have seen me in the car park and been like, oh, that's that bloke, now would be like, oh, hello, I know, I feel like I know you or whatever. So I'd be interested to see, and I look forward to discovering. So yeah, it has been, I think, again, we did various things, Rob and Ryan in particular, were behind various things we did at the start, which I think were very clever, that just said, look, we did things like, we paid, all our players have been furloughed, all our staff have been furloughed. We came and were like, we'll pay you the money that you would have been paid last year as a kind of welcome gift. It was like 60 grand, something like that. And it was like, just have what you would have had, because you've served this club for a long time during a difficult period. And we want to reflect that. And I think lots of people are like, oh, okay, we didn't need to do that. That's fair enough. And we invested in, infrastructure, stuff that doesn't really benefit the football club per se, but it does, but it improves the fan experience. We redid the tech end as it was then, it still is now. Actually, we currently doesn't have a sponsor. If anyone's listening wants to sponsor the tech or university end of the ground, we went in and kind of redid the concourse in there, which was hadn't changed since it was built in the 70s and was dark and dingy and kind of terrible, and various things. We were just like, look, we're not just spaffing money on the first team. We're not looking to just pump and dump this football club, take it up. We're trying to do things in a more holistic fashion. And I think all those things people appreciated and were nice and kind and friendly. So it's been great. I mean, the one thing I said...
It comes across loud and clear on the documentary,
really
Yeah, and it's been super rewarding. The single best thing about it for me is just... the two things. One, walking into the stadium with a badge on. That's a very selfish little thing that I just get such a kick out of every time I get to do it. And the other one is those instances where usually before a game I'm and if you're listening to this, kids, don't do this. But I go and sort of smoke cigarettes furiously outside the office and chat to people that are coming in. And what will happen is kind of virtually every game, someone will come up to me and say, I came to Wrexham for 50 years. I was a season ticket holder for 50 years. And I stopped about 8 years ago. I just couldn't bear seeing this thing I love just slowly die in front of me. And so I stopped. I did other things. But then I came to my first game tentatively about 3 weeks ago with my grandson, and I loved it, and I'm back, and I'm going to buy a season ticket next season, and I've bought the shirt, and people literally come and they sort of tears in their eyes, give me a hug, and that's the single best thing about the whole thing, because
it's a good news story, right?
It is, in
a few years. It is actually, and it's nice for you to be part of it. Yeah,
it's wonderful. I will say one final thing on that, which is the first time I zoomed with Ryan along with Rob. I did say to him, there will come a time when we draw 3 games in a row in the Championship in 2029, and someone will call you the C word in an airport in front of your children because they're a Wrexham fan. They're a new Wrexham fan.
Yes.
Who's not an old one, doesn't remember the bad times. Who's is like what I think people sometimes refer to as FIFA football fans. Sure. If you know what I mean? The people who are like, oh yeah, I'm a Liverpool fan now because they're going to buy Mbappe, and then when they don't buy Mbappe, they're like, I hate Jurgen Klopp and I hate FSG. And I was like, that will probably happen, but for now, that's we're being a victim of your success. Sure. I'm sure we would take that. We'll accept that if it means we're in the Championship and we're in it.
You have to go in a moment, so I'm just going to ask you a series of very quick questions, if that's okay. And these are all hypothetical. You can dream large, if you will. The first one would be the dream signing, excluding regens, so we can't really go that far into the future. But hypothetically, Wrexham do extremely well over the next 6 years.
Yeah.
Who's the dream? Doesn't have to be that realistic signing.
Well, I think it would be trying to bring back... I tell you who it is, Nico Williams.
Okay, yeah.
He's from the area.
Sure.
He's like a perfect example of someone who... I think he was on Wrexham's radar at one stage, but very quickly was gone into a Premier League academy. And I would love to I think if we were signing Nico, okay, I mean, this is going really bold. If we're signing Nico Williams when he's 29,
sure,
that would be the sign we've gone somewhere mad, because we're signing a full Welsh international who's from the area, Premier League player. That's I'm quite pleased with that answer.
It feels
Well,
like
really good.
Did you know that Nico Williams listens to this podcast?
I didn't. Nico,
It does feel a little bit like we birthed a transfer rumor. Just
yeah.
on the podcast.
News.
No, I
Yeah.
plucked him. Also, he used to play at Liverpool, which was also nice.
Yeah,
I quite like
sure.
it. So then I'd be like, what's a younger club like?
A little bit. And listen, Coach Phil, lovely,
Yeah.
great. We don't want to replace him.
Of course
But
not.
if we were replacing him, who's the dream coach?
Well,
Let's you can't say Klopp.
No, of course not. Well, I'm trying to look into the future because I'm hoping, we're hoping that Phil's going to build a dynasty here.
Yes.
So he can retire having coached 10,000 games.
It's a lovely scene actually when he's having his pre-match breakfast with his son.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
really
that is
cool.
nice.
Yeah, he's still in the local community with
I
his
think
routine.
the documentary has been so good for his relationship with the fans because there's that classic thing of like, again, because there's this slight barrier that we've built that they're not necessarily used to, and they were very kind of communicative with previous managers. I think lots of the fans were like just not sure about him, didn't know that much about him, hadn't seen any side to him. They just saw post-match interviews, which, as we all know, everyone is very robotic and very like that's
the job.
That's the job. Part of the job is you saying, yeah, well, we didn't do the things we were supposed to do very well, and we did some things well, and you don't get that much. So I think watching it, they have really taken him to heart since then. But my dream would be, let's see. I mean, okay, so. Going along a similar path. I mean, Steve Cooper is again someone he's head of youth at Wrexham at one stage before he went to Swansea. So be another case of bringing someone back who is from the area, knows the club. I mean, like Joe Allen. I suppose if Joe Allen turned out to be a great. I'm thinking about like current players.
Sure.
Who
Played for Liverpool.
and Wrexham, more importantly, and Wrexham and Welsh. Lots of those things.
Yeah. Okay.
Otherwise, I would love just like a wild, flamboyant sort of South American.
Marcelo Bielsa.
Yes, someone like that.
I mean, Marcelo Bielsa at Wrexham would be amazing.
That would be wild.
It would be very exciting.
Yeah.
But of course, but Marcelo Bielsa's a bit. So this is why I'm trying to pick current players because this needs to be a good 10 to 15 years in the future.
He'll be around still. He's not going anywhere. Yeah. Two more very quickly.
Yeah.
3 words, please, to describe your current sort of emotional state as it relates to Wrexham. Very hard question, but
3 words. Okay, they don't need to be connected, really, do they?
no, not to each other.
Buoyant.
Buoyant. Okay. Yeah.
Tentative, because
They're very much not connected.
no, that's what I said, they don't have to be connected, right? Well, no, only because I mean as I said earlier, the energy that I put into it, I get so stressed. I find it quite hard watching the games.
Yes.
I mean, last year when I came back, we went on a run. We won something like 13 games in this incredible sort of period after Ollie arrived in January. We went on a kind of a tear, and I came back into the stadium for our game against Eastleigh, and it was 2-2 in the 96th minute. It was the first game that I had been to since this run began, and I was like, oh, Jonah, I've jinxed it, I've ruined it. And we got a penalty, and Paul was going to take it. Paul Mullins dynamite at penalties, but I left the stands and went down and like hid sort of under the stairs.
Yeah.
And David, who runs the boardroom, sort of is like, "What's going on? Are you all right?" And I was like, I can't do it. I thought we just scored. I was like, no, it's just a penalty, because he heard the roar. He didn't know what was happening, and I sort of went and like paced on the stairs furiously, and then heard another roar and was like, oh my god, thank God. But I find it very stressful.
Yeah.
So I'm saying tentative because
your tentative buoyancy. Yeah.
Yeah, we've started brilliantly. We've scored, as I say, a hat load of goals. Notts County have also started really well. It's a very long season. It's a really difficult league to get out of. I mean, last year us and Stockport were comfortably the best teams, and we faltered in the playoff semi-final. We had some key injuries. You just can't control. I mean, we've got a lot of factors in our favour this year.
Sure.
We had transfer windows, which no one else in our division did, and we managed to get those kind of taken away. Yeah. So we can now sign players outside of a transfer window. So if we get a really bad injury in February, it doesn't screw us as badly. But yes, buoyant, tentative, and grateful, I suppose.
Grateful.
Because it's to be doing this at all remains insane and so exciting and fun.
Last question. You have an exposure now to the inside of the inner workings of a football club, and hopefully at a higher level as Wrexham become more and more successful. Surely, as a writer and as a comic, there is like invaluable material there.
Sure.
Are you already thinking that maybe you've got something in you? Could you write a sitcom or something about
there? I mean, there is enough stuff to fill a sitcom like on a weekly basis, really, in terms of things that go on. No question. I mean, I think at the moment, it's something that I kind of Lucy, when my agent and manager and stuff back home are always like, yeah, you're gonna do Why don't you do a TV show about it?
Putting their fingers
together. There's a lot of steepled fingers and like
15%
thought bubbles with swimming pools.
Dollar signs.
Ding, 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 ding. But I mean, at the moment, I'm very much. It's such a boring politic answer, but I'm very much concentrating on like just doing the job at the moment.
You're doing the post-match interview thing right now.
Yeah, I am.
Look at that.
Yeah. Listen, in some area, we did some things very well, some things not so
He's
well.
a real
we'll look
football
at it
man.
again.
He's
I am having to learn to be less candid.
Sure.
Genuinely, because I am often like, I thought this was great, or like, this was bad. And then, the single biggest takeaway I've had from doing this is you get inside football, you get behind the velvet rope, and you are reminded of the most obvious thing in the world, but that we all forget, which is just a group of human beings. It's like in any other job, it's like any other office. Some players don't like each other very much. Some players like each other loads. Some players, we had all these situations, like, so Paul Mullin, for example, much made when we signed him. He's dropped from League Two's top goal scorer. He should be going to League One, maybe a Championship club. He's come to Wrexham because they've offered him bolt loads of money. He came to Wrexham because he got fed up driving from Liverpool to Cambridge every day. And it was as simple as that. We pay him well. He's probably one of the best players in the division, probably, but I don't know what other teams are paying who. But it truly came down to him just being like, I can't face sitting in traffic around Cambridge when I'm trying to get back to my son.
Well, there's the other example of the player whose name I've forgotten from the documentary, who him and his partner's child passed away.
Jordan
and you can't, I watched that episode. It's obviously like horrifically sad, and then I sort of forget that happens, and I watch him playing football, and then they bring it back 3 episodes later, and I go, oh, he's been playing like this for the whole second half of the season. Like, that's horrifically sad, and it goes from my head so quickly as I'm watching.
We had Sean Pearson, who was the Wrexham captain when we came in. He was kind of a bit of a club legend, certainly he had been a stalwart of the team for about 5 years. Very popular figure, great guy, great captain, and we wanted to keep him on. Offered him a contract at the end of that season. The first half season that we took over, we were like, could you stay? Do you want to stay for another year or two? Be the captain. You might not be playing all the time, but you would be a very valuable figure. And he said yes. He was into it, shook hands, went home, came back the next day and was like, actually, I'm going to go to Grimsby. And we were like, oh, why? And he's like, well, my wife's family, we're from that area originally. Her family were there, we've had a baby. We spent the last period of time in lockdown. We haven't seen them very much. It would just make life way easier. And you're like, okay, fair enough. Fan base like, what's happening? We've lost our captain. Where's he going? He's living his life. He's a 33-year-old man. He's got kids. He's got to look after them.
Human being.
He's a human being, and that's the thing that we all forget so much. Is that it is human beings aplenty.
It's harder to get angry with them when you remember, isn't it?
Totally.
So that's why we forget.
Totally. Yeah.
Anyway, Humphrey Ker, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to, I don't know, what's the name of the show you're working on? Can you tell us or no?
Yes, it's called American Auto. It's not on over here. But if you're an American person, you can watch it.
People are listening are Americans,
So it's on, I think you can watch it on Peacock in America. It's on NBC normally, but it goes there.
What's Peacock?
Peacock's like a streaming service. It's NBC's streaming service. It might be on Hulu as well. I'm not sure. But Series 2, we're filming right now. We reckon in the spring.
Well, all the best with Wrexham and with Peacock.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.